Good afternoon, I'm Ella Wilson, the host of the Global Journalism Podcast. Welcome to this episode where I'm going to be discussing Brexit, a big European-wide topic and looking closely at its long-term impact on the North East region. I'm going to be analysing the coverage and narratives in local, national and global news, and this part will be focused on the coverage of the referendum and the sociological reasoning behind why it was reported the way that it was. The second part will be narrowing this down into the North East area, where I will be discussing the impacts of Britain leaving the EU with a local businessman, so stay tuned. Brexit is short for Britain exit and is the word people use to talk about the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union. A public referendum was held on Thursday the 23rd of June 2016 when voters were asked whether the UK should leave or remain in the European Union. The Leave side won nearly 52% to 48%. During the referendum, coverage was very high both in the UK and in the EU. The UK press at the time tended to endorse one side or the other in the campaign, with newspapers like the Daily Mail, The Sun and The Telegraph endorsing Leave and The Times, Guardian and Financial Times endorsing Remain. The Daily Express was very supportive of Leave, with most of their headlines being along the lines of "Vote Leave today" and "UK scores major Brexit victory." The opposite happened in European media, where most coverage was predominantly fact-based and didn't tend to endorse either side of the campaign. 4 years on, for most of Europe, the divorce between the UK and the EU has seemingly weakened the continent as global challenges have appeared, including the Russia-Ukraine war, the climate emergency, threats posed by China and Iran. This has caused friction between the UK and the EU, and this is supported by an article by IMF blog titled "The Long-Term Impact of Brexit on the European Union," which delves further into the economic relationship between the UK and the EU. American news outlets, like the New York Times, have continued covering the Brexit issue, with it being over 4 years since Britain's final departure from the EU took place. Articles from them seemingly mock the British, using headlines like "Business flocks to the Labour Party," or "A disaster no one wants to talk about," and "Why Brexit's immigration politics have fizzled out." Clearly, these articles show what opinion is held by the New York Times regarding Brexit. International news stories like these are often shaped by the values of journalists and editors, which links to the sociological issues of news framing and agenda setting. On the European side, an article from Redfield and Wilton Strategies, titled "Europeans Say Their Views of the UK Largely Unchanged Following Brexit," delves into the opinions held by many European countries such as France, Germany, Italy and Spain. The reason these countries may not express a large opinion on the issue could be due to avoiding parachute journalism, meaning they would lack a deep enough understanding of the situation to effectively report on it. Seemingly, Brexit has had ramifications on the political and economic state of the UK. Narrowing this further, a book edited by Northumbria University academics in 2019 warned that the North East was underprepared for the challenges it could face after Brexit. In this, they argued that the region is likely to be disproportionately affected by Brexit due to the North-South divide and the shortage of European funding, which the region is a major beneficiary for. Obviously, at the time Brexit was taking place, members of the North East were worried about the effects it could have on the region. Therefore, I'm going to be looking at the ramifications it has actually had on a specific local business here in the North East. So, after delving into the coverage of the referendum globally, nationally and locally, and touching on some of the sociological reasoning behind how it was reported, we recognise that people in the North East region were worried about the effects that Brexit could have at the time it took place. Jumping ahead to present time, Brexit took place over 4 years ago. Let's look at what the long-term impacts have been. An article from london.gov.uk tells us that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, spoke on the 11th of January 2024, revealing that the cost of Brexit to the UK's economy is £140 billion. According to this research, the economic damage is only going to get worse, with no more than £300 billion set to be wiped off the value of the UK's economy by just 2035 if no action is taken. Looking into this locally, an article from North East Bylines titled "The Cost of Brexit" showed us how the money lost could have instead been used to improve our economy. This included ideas such as building our NHS, rebuilding our education system, or modernising our railway system. I'm now joined by Daniel Wilson, multi-store business owner in the North East. He is here to tell us all about how Brexit has impacted his local business in the past few years.
Hi, Ella. It's great to be here and talk about a topic that's affected our business over the last few years and a subject that I find interesting.
That's great to hear. Tell us about you and your business.
Our business is Wilson Retail Limited. We run 19 convenience stores stretching from Bridlington right up to Durham. So across the northeast, they're one-stop franchises, and we sell convenience foods and tobacco, alcohol and similar products.
And I understand that you've been running your business for almost 20 years now. Do you see a difference in how you managed your business before Britain left the EU compared to how you do now?
Obviously, there's always a lot of changes. So, there's things that do alter and change as things pass. But how the Britain leaving the EU has affected us is probably more to do with some of the stock availability and areas like that, to be honest.
And how did you find the running of your company during the Brexit developments as they were progressing?
Because we're supplied by One Stop and who are owned by Tesco, a lot of the sort of work regarding sort of imports and other stuff doesn't fall on us as we're buying through wholesalers who are dealing with that. But you could see some of the issues coming through for them with the developments. I wouldn't say you necessarily notice, but you're kind of aware that things are coming. But as Brexit came and sort of happened, a lot of the impact was stock availability, pricing.
Are you still seeing these impacts now?
It's hard to judge in some ways because COVID came not long after, and then COVID had sort of an impact on stock availability, which was then put on top of it. But I would say yes, I'd say we are. I mean, there's been points in the past where they were struggling to get drivers, so there was shortage of stock because they couldn't get stock around to stores or into depots to get stock out. That was kind of a knock-on effect of Brexit, with some of the rules regarding foreign workers. You've then had sort of less availability of some stocks, that that are imported from the EU and outside the EU. I'd say some of the things were caused by COVID and some were caused by Brexit, but I'd say we are still seeing ramifications of Brexit. It's just made what is the global food chain quite a complicated sort of organism, and it really has made it more difficult, and obviously some of the rules regarding import and stuff like that and sort of labour and things, it's just added sort of another layer of complexity. I'd say the difference you can see for consumers is, I'd say that before Brexit, we weren't expected to be out of stock, and we always expected to have stock of items, and very rare that we wouldn't be able to get stock. Over the last few years, it's quite commonplace to be struggling for supplies of stock, whether that be suppliers or One Stop struggling to get them out, and I'd say that's one of the biggest changes.
Do you think like smaller local companies like yours have kind of been impacted differently to how some larger scale businesses might have?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, if you take, say, for instance, who we, use to supply us and sort of the people who sort of manufacture and produce the food, their sort of challenges are much different. They've got to obviously deal with all the new import regulations and the tariffs and sort of managing that and, dealing with all the sort of aspects of, sort of a different labour force if they can't bring some of the foreign workers in. So yeah, their challenges are much different to what we might have. We're sort of dealing with the challenges further down the line that them sort of problems present. So like I say, if there isn't enough drivers, we have seen across all of it that delivery, we get less regular deliveries. From all the suppliers, and they're all wanting to deliver less. I'm told through One Stop that, companies that deliver into the One Stop depots, they all want to deliver in less to the depots. So whereas before you wanted more frequent, regular deliveries to keep availability high, now you're being pushed the other way to have less and less. I mean, some of that's to drive costs down. Some of that probably is to do with shortage of labour and many other things. And like I say, Brexit, then sticking COVID on top of it, has just made, very, certainly changed the whole market over the last few years and certainly made it, just a bit different.
I know you said how COVID has kind of blurred the lines between what's what the impacts of Brexit are and what the impacts of COVID are, but do you think any of the ramifications from the referendum are evident now still in your business, or do you think that's kind of died down?
No, I think there's still stuff we're dealing with. I'd say availability is getting better most of the time, and I'd say it is improving. And I think some of the things I mentioned to do with labour, workforce, that has probably died down, and that's more settling off. But yeah, they're still dealing with, like I say, the problems of getting stock in at times. And I'd say there seems to be just more of an acceptance now that even across supermarkets, as not just convenience, that stock won't always be there now, which would have been a big crisis before. So yeah, I think it's kind of changed the market. I think it's just made it more difficult, and the cost. Obviously we're dealing with the cost of living crisis, and we've got inflation high. There's no doubt that Brexit has put price onto some food. Obviously, if you're doing a lot of paperwork, you've got to import stuff differently. You've got all these border controls. All these things add costs on. So I'd say, everyone's dealing with some of the ramifications, yes.
Finally, do you have any advice for other local companies who might still be dealing with the ramifications of the referendum?
For businesses on a local level, it's unless obviously you're importing and exporting, the effects will probably be similar to sort of ours. You won't directly deal with some of them. It's difficult. Obviously, you can only look around and maybe look at companies and supplies. I mean, it's possible if you're, you say a food producer, you may be able to use different ingredients and stuff like that, and things like that. But not really. I mean, I'm not really a person who could probably offer that much expertise. And if someone is sort of dealing in the imports and exports, they'll have had a massive more of an impact from Brexit, and they may be able to give me, probably give me even advice and tips on that. But there may be, as with all decisions and policies that are made, there may be some people who've gained. There is the possibility that some companies, obviously it was much easier to import from the EU. There may be some companies who now buy them from further afield or different countries that may have benefited, or there might be, other knock-on benefits. But as for us in the sort of food retailing industry, it seems to be that obviously increasing tariffs and making it more harder sometimes to bring food in and stuff like that's probably had a more negative effect on our overall business.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that informative insight into how your business has been impacted. It's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Global Journalism Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode about the ramifications of Brexit in the North East. I'm your host, Ella Wilson, and make sure to tune in next week where I'll be looking at the coverage and narratives and impact that COVID-19 had on our region, the North East. That's all for now.